Hello and welcome back to another tutorial in Cyberpunk. In this tutorial we're going to be focusing on IGCS, an injectable camera tool created by Otis Inf. This is a paid tool with a monthly subscription, but it's well worth it in my experience as a virtual photographer. In this video we'll run through the setup process and the usage of IGCS. First off, the link to this tool will be in the description. It is paid, but I would highly recommend supporting the creator if you do so decide. Otis Inf has a full list on their website of all the games that this tool is available for, with specific features for the specific title. So as far as Cyberpunk goes, we'll get started. Once you have located and downloaded the latest version of the tool for the specific game you're playing, in this case Cyberpunk, open up your game session and load into your save. We're mainly going to be focusing on Cyberpunk, but this advice will likely translate into other games as well. Please note whether you've opened your game as administrator, as this will be important in a moment. Open up the file that you've received from Patreon and run the IGCS client.exe. If you did run your game as administrator, please run this as administrator as well to avoid any issues. The game process should be detected immediately, and the DLL file that will be injected should automatically be picked up as well. If the game process isn't detected immediately, you probably don't have Cyberpunk open, and if you do, you can just go ahead and select that process from the menu. From here, you will select Inject DLL, and if all went smoothly, the tool should be active in your game. In the top left of your screen, you should see a message indicating that the tool is now active. At any point in your usage of the tool, you can use Rehook X Input, the feature that is available after you inject the tool. It effectively allows you to reset the tool in case any bugs occur. This window itself is actually going to be the toolbox for controlling and manipulating the game. For the rest of the settings in the General tab, at the bottom you will see Set as Topmost Window, which will essentially lock the tool as the topmost window. The other one is changing the opacity of the window, and Show Camera Path Control window is going to be relevant in a little bit. From here we're going to be moving into Hotsampling. So essentially what it does is bring the resolution up to any resolution that you desire. So even though my screen is 2560 by 1440, I can set a new resolution such as 4K and take my final screenshot in 4K even though it extends past the borders of my monitor. Essentially how this works is that you have a list of monitor aspect ratios and a bunch of options for resolutions that you can set. On average, most monitors are going to be 16 by 9, so you probably select a resolution from there. I generally pick 4K, the 3840 by 2160 option, but it depends on what resolution you're going for and also what your computer can handle. So I'm just going to select 3840 by 2160 here, and then we'll move on to the right side of the window. New resolution to set is where you're going to see the selection that you've made and its aspect ratio before you go ahead and execute the hot sampling. Use window border and switch to game after resizing are just quality of life settings, and they're pretty self-explanatory. The two buttons that we're really going to focus on here are the Set button and the Fake Full Screen button. So if you had a 1080p monitor and you wanted to upscale to 4K, you will select 4K, the 3840 by 2160, and press Set. The game will probably black out for a second and then reappear on your screen up at that new resolution that you've set. In order to return back to the original resolution of your screen, press Fake Full Screen and it will bring you back to your native monitor resolution. The bottom section of this page is active window resolution. So this is going to vary depending on what resolution is currently active on your screen. Mine right now is 1440p, so it's going to stay that way. So now that we're done with hot sampling, let's move down a couple to Keybindings. We will make our way back to configuration and environmental adjustments, but in order to move forward with those, we need to figure out our keybindings. So the thing that is going to be really important here is that we set a enable/disable camera keybind. So for me, that is the equal sign on my keyboard. The other one we want to set is a lock/unlock camera movement toggle as well. Not as necessary, but pretty useful. As you get more comfortable with the camera part of this tool, you'll find that there are keybindings for basically every scenario that you need. We're not going to go over every single keybind here, as the keybinds are pretty self-explanatory as we move further into the tool. So now that we're getting into the camera section of this tool, I'd like to mention that a gamepad will actually be the best experience for you when using the camera. You're probably not going to have to change the button bindings in gamepad button bindings, but if you're curious about what any of these buttons do, you can go ahead and reference this area. So now we're going to hop back to configuration. So the first thing we're going to do is actually enable our camera. So whatever you set your camera enable keybind to, hit that, and you should be disconnected from your character's point of view and able to freely scroll around. I would highly recommend using a gamepad for this scenario if you're going to follow along, but keyboard and mouse will work as well. So we'll start with camera control. Fast movement multiplier is effectively going to be how quickly you speed up, and slow movement multiplier will be the factor by which you slow down. Up movement multiplier is effectively only for the Z axis. You can check the key bindings and gamepad button bindings to see what controls what. Movement speed is going to denote the base speed at which you begin your movement. A high movement speed is going to throw you across the map, while a low movement speed is going to obviously be pretty slow. The rotation speed is how fast your camera can rotate around your point of view. So obviously, high rotation speed is going to be very fast, low is going to be very slow. Field of view zoom speed is going to be how quickly you can increase or decrease the field of view. You can reference the button bindings to see how to do so. Mouse sensitivity factor is only if you're using a mouse for the control of the rotation of the camera, but obviously a higher factor is going to increase the sensitivity and lower vice versa. Camera control device is going to be set to either device that you wish to control the camera with, whether that be your gamepad or the keyboard and mouse. Both can also be used simultaneously. Invert Y look direction is self-explanatory. Now we'll move into camera smoothing options. So this is how you get those really creamy and smooth transitions and movements in your shots. This is mainly for if you're doing some sort of cinematography, like some of the videos that I've done in the past. So we'll look at movement and rotation interpolation factor first. Movement interpolation factor is a little bit different than the movement speed. So interpolation is essentially going to create values between 0, which is not moving at all, and your full speed, which is whatever you've set it to kind of give this slow ease in and ease out of your movements. So if we have 0 interpolation factor and we move around with our gamepad, the movement is going to be very jittery. It's going to dead stop every time we stop the movement of the camera. But if we have an interpolation factor for the rotation and the movement, we'll see this smooth transition between our movements, and that doesn't matter if it's rotation or movement. If you have this above 0, you will have a level of interpolation for a very smooth shot. Field of view interpolation factor is essentially the same thing, just relating to field of view, so you can kind of throw the field of view higher and let it ride itself out until it stops, or you can pull it back and it'll slowly ride it out until it stops as well. So it's essentially just a way to blend everything together into one smooth motion. The next part of camera smoothing options actually relates to the shaky effect on the camera. So I like to use this if I'm doing something from a first-person point of view. I'll usually use a camera shake to emulate kind of a hand cam situation, just to give the look of the shot a little more realism. You can increase the shake movement frequency and the shake rotation frequency all the way to the top, but if you don't give it any strength at all, then it won't do anything. We need to add a little bit of shake movement strength to make the frequency work, and a little bit of shake rotation strength to make the rotation work. And if you do a little bit, it's going to give you this natural sway, almost like a breathing, but if you do a lot, it's going to be this really debilitating, earthquakey mess. So you can use that at your artistic leisure, but I've found these tools very effective for a very realistic look in a lot of my films. The next feature we're going to take a look at is actually the Show Camera Path Control window, and that's that slider on the bottom of the tool. This is where you can start getting pretty creative with the shots you take in the game. So it might look like a lot right out of the gate, but what this actually is is a script for your camera to follow. So you can be doing other things in game, say like driving a car around while the camera is on a set track. Kind of like a dolly shot in real life filmmaking. So total playtime is how long it's going to take the camera to finish the loop that you've created. So if you have 3 nodes that stretch all the way from the bottom of the building to the top of the building, if you have set the total playtime to 5 seconds, that loop is going to be completed within 5 seconds guaranteed. Play and stop are obviously going to be available once you've created some nodes, but we'll get there pretty soon. Playback, being relative to the character's location, is a tool that I've used a couple times now. I could essentially strap a loop of me circling a motorcycle that my character's on over and over again while I drive the motorcycle around for maybe a cool artistic, race shot or something like that. So playback has a constant speed, means that from node to node, your camera movement is going to be equally balanced all the way through the shot. Using an ease in or an ease out at the start or end of the path essentially has the same effect as the interpolation that we were talking about earlier. Wait 3 seconds before playback starts is just if you need to prepare something before the playback actually begins. Camera shake control is the exact same as manually controlling the camera and setting up a hand cam shot like we were talking about before, but this is just going to be specifically when the playback is running on your camera. Actions to perform while playing are just some quality of life things. Unpause game if paused. Override game speed essentially means that the tick rate of the game is going to increase or decrease, slow motion or fast motion, whichever you decide, and close this window is just if you want to see the shot actually going down or record it or something. Path/node information is where you'll actually set up the nodes. So what you want to do is press plus on the path section and create a path for you to start creating nodes on. So once you've done that, set up the camera where you want it to be, and we'll set up 3 nodes and have the loop run, just for demonstration purposes. So if I set one node here where I want it to be, that's going to be the start point. I'm going to set an intermediary point, and then I'm going to move and turn around and set the final end point. So as I'm doing this, I am pressing plus on the nodes, so you're physically moving the camera to each place that you want it to be. Once that's all done, you'll see that play and stop are now available options. So from there, you can sit back, press play, and watch what you've created. And you can also loop it. So if you turn that ticker to the right, you can loop the system so that it is completed in the allotted time and just keeps repeating itself over and over and over again. So that is camera path control. There are a lot of key bindings that you can take a look at to grant ease of access to this control panel, but for now, we're going to move on to environmental adjustments. So environmental adjustments is a very simple part of this tool, but it's also the part of the tool that I use the most. So I am primarily a virtual photographer, not a virtual videographer. So I'm using this tool most of the time to set up my portraiture in Cyberpunk. One thing that I need to preface before we get into this part is that Otis actually has a lot of tie-ins to other mods that makes this tool much more effective. So if you haven't already seen my how to take pretty photos in Cyberpunk tutorial video, you should go check that out now, and specifically if you haven't installed AMM. AMM, or Appearance Menu Mod, is a tool that is effective in getting the game speed to work, as well as the PM Lookat control to function correctly for a secondary person. So if you don't have that mod, most of these things are still going to work, but you may be limited in some regards. So let's get into it. Miscellaneous options, very simple. Time of day controls the position of the sun. Game speed is going to be whether the game is in slow motion or fast motion. Wetness options is for the street wetness factor as well as the puddle size. So if it is raining in-game, you are able to change how wet the ground looks as well as the size of the puddles. So this is kind of what I meant by IGCS having specific functions for specific games. These ones are specifically built for Cyberpunk, so these may not be present in Baldur's Gate or Horizon Zero Dawn. So if you enter photo mode and toggle look at camera, your character will naturally follow the camera as you rotate it around. PM Lookat control actually overrides that so that you can delicately manipulate individual parts of the body in order to craft a specific pose. So this includes the torso, the head, as well as the eyes. And there are 2 modifiers for each of these things. You can also have a maximum of 2 persons involved in this setup. So you can spawn an NPC with the mod AMM and also have your V involved in the photo. So it's fairly simple from here actually. You have full access control to manipulating your character in this mode. This also works with having different poses. So if you have different pose packs from different mods, that will all intermingle together and you'll be able to make some pretty interesting poses. Specifically, the eye look at point is my favorite one. I do have some photography techniques that I could go over in a future video, but a lot of that is actually contained within my Cyberpunk photography tutorial. So the dual character system is a little bit finicky. I've had it be very finicky. Sometimes in AMM I have to freeze and unfreeze the target character in order for this to actually work. But once you do get it going, you'll kind of end up with this kind of effect where you can manipulate the torso and the head and everything of both the characters at the same time. I haven't actually done a photo shoot with 2 people at once, so it's not my forte, but that's generally how it can work. So that pretty much concludes my beginner's guide to Otis Inf IGCS. There are a couple things I left out, but that's just because those tie into reshade. So I've already covered the cinematic depth of field by Otis Inf in my reshade video, which you can go check out in the description below. But I also did not include the Cyberlit add-on, which is another tool in reshade used for lighting the scene in the game. So I may make a video on Cyberlit at some point, but as it stands, this is IGCS in a nutshell. So I'd like to give a warm thank you to my Patreon subscribers, all existing and all new, the benefactors McCoy, Stardark Garnet, and Rice, as well as my citizens Armless Cookie and Smiling Fish. You make this all work, you give me a lot of motivation, and you make it possible for me to focus more on making videos for you guys. If you'd also like to join them on Patreon, I have 4K spreads of my virtual photography, and also, depending on your tier, I have early access to all video content. So if you'd like to do so, please follow the link in the description. Otherwise, make sure to comment down below if you have any sort of questions, or if there is anything that you'd possibly like me to make a tutorial on in the future. If you'd like to support me in other ways, you can always subscribe to the channel and like the video. That always goes a long way as well.